Summary of research on distance education. Distance education, as defined by Michael Albright of the University of South Dakota, is formal, institutionally based educational activities where the teacher and learner are normally separated from each other in location, and where two-way interactive telecommunications are used to connect them for the sharing of video, data, and voice instruction. Other educators have slightly different definitions, and it is acknowledged that distance may include separation by time. In recent years, distance education has become a popular topic with professional conferences and articles done by professional organizations devoting much attention to it. In the minds of many, distance education will change the world. The question is, how well does it work? The answer to that question is that distance education can work quite well. According to studies done and compiled by T.L. Russell in 1999, there is no difference in the effectiveness of distance education as opposed to traditional classroom education. In 2009, the United States Department of Education published a meta-analysis and review of online learning that indicated that online learning students actually achieve better than counterparts in traditional classroom settings, possibly because they spent more time with their online studies. However, R.E. Clark has declared that the media are mere vehicles that deliver instruction but do not influence student achievement any more than the truck that delivers our groceries causes changes in nutrition. Only the content of the vehicle can influence achievement. His statement makes it clear that, in his opinion at least, learning outcomes are determined by the quality of instruction, regardless of the means of delivery. Learning outcomes are, after all, what everyone is looking to ensure. They are the behaviors that are measurable and observable that result from online instruction. The only way to measure learning outcomes is to determine what those outcomes must be. And that means establishing the objectives before preparing the lesson. The objective is what instruction is expected to change. It is what the student needs to learn. Traditionalists measure learning outcomes in terms of behavioral objectives. Learning is expected to occur under specific conditions, and the exact behavior is to be demonstrated, must be measured with an exact standard. More recently, identified objectives have recently become popular. These students themselves determine at some point in the instructional activity what changes he or she feels are important indications of learning achievement. Whether traditional objectives are used or learner-identified objectives, learning environments should be media-rich, and students should demonstrate learning outcomes with a variety of technology-based activities. Students may be tested, or they may create a project that demonstrates what they have learned. Rubrics that identify what the students should accomplish in order to achieve the desired learning outcomes should be provided for students to be aware of how their work will be assessed. Learner perceptions. Distance educators have long been concerned with learner perceptions of distance education. At one time, it was believed that distance education was somehow inferior to traditional classroom education. Frequent studies of student satisfaction with online courses in general were done in the early years, and now studies target different areas and specific courses. It was learned from research conducted by Sun, Tsai, Finger, Xing, and Ye in 2008 that the factors that most profoundly affected student perceptions and satisfaction were the instructors' attitudes toward distance education, the course quality, the students' perceptions of the course's usefulness, course flexibility, and student computer anxiety. These findings were supported by a similar subsequent study conducted by Oscon and Korsler in 2009, which also indicated that instructor quality, system quality, and content quality all influence student satisfaction. An earlier study conducted in 2007 and completed by over 500 college students showed that the instructor's attitude toward technology and teaching style, the computer competency of the student, the use of interactive collaboration, and the course content and effectiveness of the technology system were all important factors affecting student satisfaction. More recently, a study that focused on students in rural areas who were taking advanced English composition courses online found that scheduling and time constraints, academic rigor of class and student motivation, technology problems with online medium, lack of teacher immediacy, and parental influences negatively impacted student satisfaction. The goal of this study was to learn what caused a high dropout rate for the online course, and the findings enable instructors to address these problems to improve the effectiveness of instruction. Learner attributes and other variables in distance education. Wang, Fokker, Suzuki, and Griffin found in 2003 that the dropout rate for distance education courses was about 26%. In 1992, Loeb conducted a study in which he examined the relationship between academic and social integration variables, as well as the persistence of students in a secondary distance education program. He divided the students into two groups based on persistence. One group, called the completer, persisters were those who completed or were continuing with coursework 1 year after enrollment, while those in the other group, referred to as the dropouts, non-starter group, had dropped out during the year following enrollment. This study revealed how persistence is a necessary attribute for learners in distance education. Out of 351 surveys mailed, only 181 were returned, and of those returned, 124 were the surveys of completers, persisters. Additionally, variables shown between the two groups were that completer persisters were more likely to have higher educational goals than their dropout non-starter counterparts. They were also more likely to study more than 10 hours per week. Other variables studied were self-initiated contact with the school, student attitudes toward their tutors, and student attitudes toward missing peer socialization. The only significant difference between the two groups among these variables was the attributes toward tutors. Completers, persisters had more favorable attitudes toward their tutors, but while both groups indicated positive attitudes toward their tutors, the dropout non-starter group had a higher percentage of undecided responses to the question concerning tutors, which affected the results obtained. According to Sun et al. In 2008, Characteristics of students that related to student satisfaction were perceptions of course quality, the computer anxiety of the students, flexibility, ease of use and usefulness of content. A review of the research by Talent Runners reported the following. Well-based learning environments take into account the cognitive style of learners. Learners favor their ability to control their learning environment and think this control is more than a convenience but influences satisfaction and engagement. Learning style relates to use of online teaching and learning tools. One approach is not best for all students, so a variety of approaches should be considered by instructional designers. Learner characteristics of computer competence, degree of collaboration in the class, and opinions about course content and design are critical learning factors according to Salem. These findings were supported by Sun et al. In 2008. Interactions and communication tools utilized in distance education. Correspondence study utilizes the post office to connect the teacher and the learners. It is inexpensive, can be completed almost anywhere, and has been shown to be effective. Pre-recorded media utilizes audio and video recording systems to guide the distance learner. Two-way audio. The distant learner and the instructor are interactive with some form of live two-way audio connection. For example, telephone system and telebridge communication. Two-way audio with visuals. This involves sending graphic information synchronously to distant learners. One example is a special display board that looks like a chalkboard, but that actually transmits whatever is drawn on it to a similar display board at a distant site. One-way live video. This is referred to as the broadcast distance education. Most broadcast television approaches are offered by public television stations. Most often, students watch a broadcast and respond to the assignment. Two-way audio, one-way video. This approach is commonly applied in corporate training, uses regular telephone lines to send and receive audio and video signals. They use an approach called compressed video because fewer than the normal number of 30 video frames per second are transmitted between the sites. Desktop two-way audio video. In order to utilize this approach, special devices are needed. Satellite or telephone network time must be reserved. There are multiple items that can be used, but now higher quality cameras and even complete classrooms can be connected to a computer for transmission of instruction for distant learners. One popular system today is Zoom. Describe the importance of institutional, faculty, and student perspectives on distance education. Everyone plays an important part in the development of distance education. Institutional, faculty, and student perspectives on the distance education are all crucial if distance education is to be successful. Distance education has definitely moved into higher education with many new programs being added continuously. According to Simonson, perceptions and attitudes are relatively complex, and that resource support in the form of both technologies and development personnel are critical for building faculty support. The author also states that faculty response to the demands of developing and sustaining distance education offerings are varied, complex, and influenced by a myriad of personal and institutional factors. Studies have shown that a large majority of faculty stated that they are willing to teach a course using distance delivery. Administrators or faculties who wish to create and sustain distance learning should identify those faculty willing to use and then provide technical and resource support within a reward structure that encourages willing faculty to become users. According to recent studies, 249 graduate students were surveyed to identify positive components that led to their satisfaction and perceived challenges that inhibited it. Findings from the study indicated that interaction between students and with the instructors has a major impact on their satisfaction. Other challenges identified were sufficient learner support that linked to campus resources and the need to varying instructional design and delivery to facilitate students' desire to learn. In contrast, students were highly satisfied with their clarity and organization of instruction using sufficient resources. The instructor's role was identified as being vitally important to students' satisfaction. Identifies barriers to distance education in K through 12 higher education institutions and corporations. The barriers in distance education in K through 12 are fear, need for lack of support, scheduling problems, technical problems, and need for training. The barriers in higher educational institutions are increased time commitment, lack of money to implement distance education, lack of staff support to help course development, difficulty keeping up with technological changes, and the lack of strategic planning for distance education. The barriers in corporations: organizational resistance to change, lack of shared vision for distance education in the organization, lack of strategic planning for distance education, slow pace of implementation, difficulty keeping up with technological change. 3 online professional communities for teaching at a distance are Access Distance Learning. This distance learning plan provides additional educational offerings for all Alabama public high school students. Students can take access courses that the school would not be able to offer in a traditional classroom. Students work completely online on a particular subject, thus gaining educational opportunities they would have been otherwise denied. APEC is an affordable change of secondary schools that offer a digital curriculum which prepares students for college, work, and life. Virtual schools are schools that teach students online. Students attend schools through the internet at home and have a state-certified teacher who instructs them. This is an alternative for students who cannot afford private school but for whatever reason cannot or do not want to attend public schools.